The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. We have sent invitations to all of the candidates for mayor to appear on our program, and tonight we present our third one-on-one with a mayoral candidate. Our guest tonight is a former city councilman and a Democratic candidate for mayor. Sal Albanese returns to BronxTalk. For the record, he was last here on March 18th, 1997, the last time he ran for mayor. We have plenty to talk about with Mr. Albanese, about his campaign as well as a range of topical issues. To ensure balance and objectivity in all of our interviews with mayoral candidates, we will not take live phone calls, but you can email questions or comments to us, and we can try and incorporate them into the program or get them to the candidate afterwards and try and get you an answer. For now, a former city councilman and a candidate for mayor, please join me in welcoming Sal Albanese back to BronxTalk. Haven't seen you in a while. Nice to have you here with us.
Thanks a lot. It's great to be here.
Let's get right to it. Bronx voters could say, now wait a minute, I could choose between the public advocate, the city council speaker, the controller, a recently almost successful Democratic candidate for mayor. Why should I vote for Sal Albanese, who has been out of the picture for a long time? What really is this campaign about?
Well, Gary, thanks for having me on. People should vote for me because I'm the only candidate in this race that's not a career politician. Have a strong record of independence when I was a city council member. I'm not accepting contributions from lobbyists and from people who do business with the city. And I'm committed to putting the people in charge of City Hall. I'm running for mayor because the city's been great to me and my family. I came here as an immigrant at the age of 8. I grew up in a working class neighborhood in Brooklyn where my mother raised us on a garment worker's salary. The public schools, the libraries, the CUNY system, all services the city offered helped to elevate my family from the working class to the middle class. And Gary, I believe that the political class is letting future generations down. We're not where we were years ago in terms of services, and I'm going to provide the same services to future New Yorkers that I had, which I think are essential to building the city going forward.
Painting yourself as an outsider, and it resonates nicely, I suppose, especially in the Bronx, where
Right.
we're always looking for maybe something or somebody different. But painting yourself as an outsider can be difficult. Can you be effective as a political leader if you don't have the kind of connections and kind of expertise and maybe even some of the experience that citywide office holders currently have?
Well, I think I can. I'm not somebody who doesn't understand government. I was in government for 15 years as a council member, and I passed legislation. For example, the city's first living wage law, which took an awful lot of workers. I had to bring people together. I only had 2 sponsors in the beginning, and that bill put $3 billion in the pockets of 70,000 workers. And I've passed legislation, for example, school bus drivers, random testing for school bus drivers in the city. That was my bill. I've done a number of things as a council member, so I know how to build coalitions and can work with people. But I am independent. I'm not trying to paint myself as an independent. I think anyone who knows me, even people who don't like my voting record, will acknowledge that I was the most independent member of the city council in the history of the city council. So, and I think people are looking for independent leadership. I think people are fed up with the daily indictments and corruptions of our political system. So they are looking for somebody who's not tied to the party machines and to the lobbyists like my opponents are. So I think we're going to resonate with voters. And I also looked around and I said, I am the most qualified person to lead the city. I'm a school teacher, right? I taught for 11 years in our city public schools. I came here as an immigrant. The city is 40% immigrant based. I worked as a councilman for 15 years. I've been in the private sector. I'm actually the only person with a law degree that's running, which is highly unusual. And I have a financial services background. So I've got the private sector, the governmental experience, the teaching experience. No one, education is a major issue facing
I think
the
Adolfo
city.
Carrion was a teacher, if I remember correctly, somewhere along the way. I don't know how many years. I don't think it was 11 or 15
Was
years.
he? Was
but
Adolfo
I
a
believe
teacher?
he was a teacher. So Bronxites could probably confirm that, but
Yeah.
I think that was probably the case.
Oh.
So there you go.
Well,
You were here in 1997. Is there a difference between running now and 16 years ago? Is there a difference in you, other than the years that have passed and things you might have learned between now and 16 years ago? Or is it essentially the same
No,
thing?
there is a difference. As I said, the 15-year private sector experience, legal and financial, is certainly helpful when you're running the city of New York. And also, there's a campaign finance law that I helped pass years ago, which is a lot more generous than it was when I ran in 1997.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, any small contribution from a city resident was matched 2-to-1.
Mm-hmm.
This time around, it's 6-to-1. So it gives me an opportunity to raise money from New Yorkers who are interested in honest government and have enough money to get my message out. As I said, I am limiting myself to people who are interested in honest government. I don't want contributions from people who do business with the city because I want to get there to make decisions on the merits. So that 6-to-1 match is different from 97. If you remember, I got 22% of the vote in 97, what was surprised an awful lot of people. This is a race with 7 people in the arena, and there will be a runoff, and I plan on coming in number 1 or number 2.
Is the city different, and are the needs of the people in the city, specifically the people in the Bronx, different from what they might have been 16 years ago?
I believe it is different. I mean, there are some good things that have happened in the city. The city is a much safer city than it was then, and I want to continue to keep it safe. And I have a plan to do that in terms of hiring additional officers. Each precinct in the Bronx, under my plan, would get at least 25 new cops because patrol strength is eroded. So the other thing that's different is that income inequality is growing. There's a huge gap. People are not earning enough money to live in the city, average folks. Affordable housing has become prohibitive. So it's a less affordable city than it was for average New Yorkers. So we have to address that. We need to build more affordable housing. We have to create more living wage jobs because otherwise we're going to have a 2-tiered city. A small group of very wealthy people and
I think many people in the Bronx believe we already have a
Well,
2-tier city, and I think Freddie Ferrer very famously talked
right.
about...
Freddie was right. And it's worse than it was in 97.
I want to get one more...
By the way, Freddie stole that from me.
Is that true?
I hope he's watching.
He might be. He does watch the show. And we'll hear from him. I'm sure he'll send me a message and say, hey, wait a minute. I want to ask one more political question, then we'll get to some of the issues that you raised and talk about Bronx issues, which, of course, our Bronx voters want to know about. You have on your website, for the past year and a half, Bill de Blasio, you say, has been fleecing the taxpayers by putting his campaign operatives on the public payroll. This is a pretty serious charge. Can you back this up? How do you know that they are campaign operatives and not people who legitimately work in the office of the public advocate?
Well, because you look at their resumes, they're all political operatives. I mean, they're not public policy people. They're bright young people whose entire experience has been working in campaigns. And I don't have a problem with hiring them, but put them on the campaign payroll. Don't put them on the public payroll. And he's not the only one. Today we had another press conference where Christine Quinn, we discovered she has 7 people on the payroll.
How many people do you allege that de Blasio had?
9 de Blasio, 7 for Quinn, and 6 for John Liu. $1.4 million worth of jobs that they've hired over the last 18 months. These are all people with political, and we've identified the people. We've tracked where they've been before, and they all come from campaigns. and they're all now on the city payroll. And I believe they're there for political purposes.
On your website, you talk about a suggestion that for 18 months prior to an election, no new hires
That's
or
right.
no new positions
That's
created.
right.
You think this would solve this problem?
Absolutely. 18 months before a citywide race, there should be a ban on hiring any new people. Obviously, if you're replacing somebody that's essential to the office, you can do that. If you need a new press secretary retires, a person that is needed to make sure that the workload of the office flows properly, I don't have a problem with. But new people, not if you're running for citywide office. 18 months prior, there should be a ban because the taxpayers are getting fleeced, by the way.
What are your former colleagues? Have you talked with any former colleagues about this in the city council?
No, they haven't. That's
That's a highly politicized.
Look, I've criticized the city council. I mean, I get along personally with a lot of the folks that are in government, but in terms of public policy, they really are not serving the taxpayers. For example, member items. I think they should be banned. Christine Quinn has been doling out those things to individual council members, and communities get shortchanged. Because somebody in the Bronx who lives in the South Bronx that represents the South Bronx doesn't get along with the speaker, should the South Bronx be shortchanged? And that's what we do. That's what they do with member items.
However, and many elected officials will tell you that that's the only way I can get funding to well worth it charities or organizations, community centers, little leagues. Extra money go for a development project.
Nonsense.
Let me add one more. Just happened in the Bronx that a senior center was saved because an elected official brought $350,000 of construction money from a member item to help build a Head Start program. That sounds like win-win to me.
Well, there are some great programs that are funded, and if they're good, they should be baselined. They should not be doled out at the discretion of the council member. I have said
or the discretion of the speaker of the
exactly.
council.
She gives it out to the council members dole it out. And as you know, it's been a breeding ground for corruption. A lot of the indictments and convictions have resulted because of member items.
I feel like I'm negotiating it, which I'm certainly not, but would you be happier with it if the control of it was taken out of the hands of the speaker, and there was a more specific way of whether it's based on need or whether it's based on population at the city council members? You would accept that?
I would accept it if it was done objectively, but I would like to see good programs, and there are a lot of good programs that are funded, be baselined into the budget. There's no reason. Look, what they're doing is they're taking taxpayer money to help them get elected. That's what they're doing. This is not, and some of the council members act as if they're doing a great favor. This is money that belongs to the taxpayers. It doesn't belong to them. They're going into neighborhoods and saying, "Look what I'm giving you." This is money that belongs to the taxpayers, and it's been a breeding ground for corruption. Relatives have been placed on a payroll. There have been ghosts on the payroll.
Certainly in the Bronx,
we
know
the deal. So let's ban it. They did it by the way, the legislature banned member items for the same reason. I mean, we've got a really troubled political system. People are so cynical as they watch day in and day out people getting locked up. I mean, that's why we have.
We certainly have had our share in the BX. You know that. So how well do you know the Bronx? One thing that Bronxites, I can tell you from having sat in this chair for many years, are self-conscious about is that citywide leaders really don't understand them or don't have their best interests in mind. So just give our Bronx viewers a sense of your understanding of what this borough is and what it needs.
Well, it's a great borough with a great history. I mean, I'm familiar with some of the neighborhoods in the Bronx, like Mott Haven, where you have this Fresh Direct has become a major issue there.
We can talk about that.
Hunts Point is also an area that has tremendous potential. I know that the Greenway is a big issue now between on the Hudson River, the cycling and walking path that they want to extend into Westchester, which is a big issue in Riverdale. I was up there just recently. I'm familiar. I have relatives that live in Woodlawn, so I visit Katona Avenue on a regular basis. And of course, I go to Yankee Stadium a lot. You know, one of the greatest treats of my life was having been invited to open tryout at Yankee Stadium where I actually got dressed in the locker room and actually
There you
feel
go.
the ball on.
A little while back, though, I assume.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was,
You know, just you brought it up, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because at this point it's history. But it'll give people a sense of how you feel. Was the process and ultimate construction of the new stadium done properly and in a way that you think the city, the Bronx, and the Yankees should be proud?
Well, I mean, the stadium is a great stadium. It's
I'm
tremendous.
not evaluating
for the Bronx.
that.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
talking about
I think
because you know there's issues in the Bronx.
I think I'm a little bit concerned because there are issues now all over the city about stadiums. There's a soccer stadium that's being proposed in Queens, and there's
In the park.
and people are concerned about their parkland being taken away because that was the same issue in the Bronx. So I think that there wasn't enough community input there. I think the Yankees, who I love, got a sweetheart deal. You know, huge tax breaks. Steinbrenner took the city for a ride. But overall, it's good for the Bronx. But I would want to see more community input. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not accepting money from developers, because these decisions should be made with community input. And if you're indebted to these folks, you're going to exclude the community.
Today, not too far from here, they announced a sweeping community benefits agreement at what will be the new Kingsbridge National Ice Palace, talking about, and I'll just quote from their press release, wall-to-wall green jobs, at least 51% Bronx procurement, scholarships for Bronx residents to study renewable energy and green building design, after-school sports program, et cetera, even no plastic bottles in the facility, which is a nice thing. Is this the kind of thing that could be duplicated, or is this the kind of thing that will say to developers, you know what, we are not business friendly here because we're going to put so many requirements that you're going to want to build somewhere else?
No, I think the city's so attractive that developers will always build here, and I like that proposal. I think we need to do more in terms of promoting green jobs. One of the things that I want to do is use the city's huge contract and out budget to create jobs for New Yorkers. Why can't we build subway cars that we buy here in the Bronx, in Hunts Point, or in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, or in the Sunnyside Yard in Queens? Why can't we build our taxis here? I mean, that would create literally thousands of jobs for Bronxites and other New York City residents. So I think it's a great thing. New York City is so attractive. It's the world's greatest city that developers will build here. And they're not going to be discouraged. They're going to do very well. But they're going to have to cooperate and help the neighborhoods as well. One of the things that they've done in the Hudson River Yard project on the west side is that they're actually contributing money for mass transit developers. So we need to make deals like that. We can't have the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, right, or my borough. I mean, they got a great deal there. I mean, Forrest Ratner did, and they were supposed to build housing and create jobs. None of that ever happened. So there should be clawback provisions to make sure that developers follow through on their commitments.
Do you make them sign that ahead of time?
Yes, absolutely, and really penalize them very heavily if they don't follow through.
Then that segues right into something that you brought up, and that is this fresh direct deal. Do you like what you've heard and seen about it? Would you recommend that this go forward?
I'm worried about it. I mean, we're still evaluating it. I mean, it's great. It's generally good for the borough that it creates jobs, but there are environmental issues with the trucks that are going through there, and it's also the issue of why can't they pay living wages to the workers? I mean, that should be part of the deal. So those are two areas that I'm concerned about: what they're going to pay their workers, and what kind of environmental impact will it have with these trucks that are not environmentally friendly? That
deal was solidified over an MOU and you addressed it somewhat in your discussion before about what you asked developers to do. That is essentially not really enforceable, and they talked about whatever the penalty is if they don't agree to it and don't ultimately perform properly. Is really barely. I mean, they won't get like the borough president's input of $3 million out of the 130 they're getting from the city. Is there a way to make these MOUs enforceable, or at this point, this is just not the way to do business in the city of New York?
No, you've got to make them enforceable. I mean,
and you put that in writing on the MOUs?
Absolutely, and there has to be penalties that go along with it if developers or if the business doesn't do what it promises to do. Look, the taxpayers are getting the raw end of the deal on a lot of these projects. We are the greatest city in the world. I mean, people want to come here. Let's use that leverage to help our citizens here in New York. Let's not give the store away to these people. They're going to make huge profits. And I come from the private sector. I mean, I believe in the profit motive. That the free enterprise system is a great system, but there has to be some equity between the taxpayers and these projects. It can't all be that all the benefits go to them. It's a win-win proposition for them, and it's lose-lose for the taxpayers in many cases. And I think a lot of it has to do with the political system. You know, they hire lobbyists who are politically connected, and they raise a lot of money for a lot of the people that are in office. And unfortunately, they owe so many favors that they in many cases shortchange the taxpayer.
Let's talk education. You're a former teacher. You've talked about that at the outset of the show. What do you make of mayoral control of schools under Michael Bloomberg?
I think the mayor's done a lousy job with mayoral control. The morale is down in many of our schools. Teachers are really, I have two daughters that are teachers, and they tell me that the morale is bad. However, I want to keep mayoral control because I want to fix what Bloomberg is broken. I want to stop demonizing teachers. I want to focus on early intervention. You know, fixing our schools is no easy task. There is no, Gary, you've been around. How many years have we heard this? It's very, very complicated. And part of the problem is that nobody talks about one of the main issues that impacts kids, which is poverty. You know, poverty causes stress, and stress causes developmental issues. And I want to create pediatric wellness centers in low-income communities around the city because parents know that it's not an IQ issue. It is an issue of poverty that causes all of these problems, and the impact on kids from 0 to 3 is really what we're not paying attention to. We now know that the first 3 years of a child's life are pivotal, and we need to address it. I want to focus on early intervention.
You know, people like Dennis Walcott, who came out recently and said that none of the Democratic candidates understand anything about the city's education, will look at what you just said and say, you see, he's talking education, but he's talking something else. We had a plan. We looked at schools. We looked at grades. We dealt with the schools conclusively. They don't want to hear about you're going to solve poverty and so.
No, I'm not going to solve poverty. I'm not going to solve poverty. I didn't say that. What I said was the poverty causes kids to come into our buildings at 4 or 5 years old, so far behind that they never catch up. I mean, and Gary, the evidence is compelling. We know now.
Yeah, I'm not. I want to get back to the schools. And
yeah,
what I want to know
part
is
of it.
All the candidates, the Democratic candidates, all answer that question the same way. They all say the same thing. We don't like what Michael Bloomberg did. I'm not going to close the schools in the same way. What's the difference between Sal Albanese's education policy versus, I can name all the other candidates?
Well, my education policy is totally different than theirs. I'm going to focus on the 0 to 3 years of age. I'm going to bring all of the early intervention programs under one roof called the Department for Early Learning, because there's all these early childhood programs are split between HRA and the Department of Health. I'm going to bring them all under one umbrella so we can make it more efficient. And we're going to start working with these kids from birth in poor communities. We have teachers, doctors, and parents working together in a multidisciplinary approach. So when a kid comes into a building to 4 or 5 years of age, they're not so far behind that they'll never catch up. They wind up in special education. They wind up in our criminal justice system, and that's not being addressed. And that is one of the issues that distinguishes me from all of the other candidates, because we all agree that we need universal pre-K. We've got to stop teaching to the test. We've got to stop closing so many of our schools, but nobody's talking the period that we need to stop working with these kids in poor communities from 0 to 3, and I'm the only one that has a plan.
To me, what resonates there is the notion of an interagency approach. So
that's right.
And that's where you would bring in, I guess, the wellness centers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that I want to do as a former school teacher is provide a more powerful student teaching experience. When I student taught, I worked with a cooperating teacher.
So teacher training is
teacher
important.
training is important. Teacher training is very
running
important.
Running out of time.
Yeah.
You talked about a different topic, and we don't have a lot of time, but a fairer tolling system and the tolls.
Right.
how would that work? I mean, we all know what it costs to go across the White Zone and the Tri-Borough.
It's outrageous, by the way.
It's not the Tri-Borough, by the way. So,
Kennedy.
but that's right. But how do you back off that and pay for that? I mean,
Well, here it is.
Those have been structured.
Here it is. I've got the most comprehensive plan, transportation plan, out of all the candidates. What I want to do is, with the fair tolling plan is reduce tolls on bridges where there are limited mass transit options in the area, like the Verizon or the Thrigsnag.
That people have to do in order to
Exactly,
get
because there's mass transit is really not that available or slow, what have. And I want to add tolls to bridges where there are lots of mass transit options.
For example,
Brooklyn Bridge, Manhattan Bridge,
Well,
all
there's
the
no
East
toll
River
on the
crossing.
Brooklyn Bridge.
Well, we're going to add
I
them.
see.
We're going to add those tolls, and it's going to raise $1 billion in revenue.
and
it's
then
gonna-
encourage people to take mass transit.
Exactly.
One last question, and clearly you and I could go at this
We
for
could.
a while.
We could talk baseball forever.
Yeah, that's another topic. You said in your website you mentioned it on the show, talking about hiring more police officers.
Right.
11% increase in the total number of police protecting communities. Again, how do you pay for that? Everybody, who wouldn't want more police officers?
I'm the only one who has a plan to pay for it. First of all, we can't skimp on public safety. You know, we have to continue with having 1,000 officers assigned to anti-terrorism. You saw what happened in Boston. Patrol strength has to be increased because we have a lot of quality of life conditions that are not being addressed in many neighborhoods. I can give you examples of complaints I've received. So what I want to do is phase in and hire 3,800 more officers, and I want to pay for it by modernizing our pension plan. Our pension plan, because I come from that business, is not performing as well as, say, the Toronto plan. It performs 3% less. That means the city has to contribute more money because of the performance of the pension plan. I want to reform it and modernize it, and if we can compete with the Toronto system, the city would save $3 billion.
Sal Albanese, thank you so much for returning to Bronx Talk. Win, lose, or draw, you're a great guest, and we're going to have you back.
Thanks, Gary.
And I know you
enjoyed
hope
it.
it's win. And
It's win. It's win.
All right, thank you so much. And I think Jane along the way put up your website so people who wanted to get in. Jane, do I have enough time to read the email we got? Okay, after the show we did with John Liu, one of your competitors, we received this email from George from Pelham Parkway. He wanted to know, where did $1 million of taxpayer money that had been granted for Pelham Parkway as part of the Croton project mitigation end up going? Is this part of the overall shafting that the Bronx got from having a large portion of the original $200 million Croton project mitigation to improve Bronx Park canceled by the city? I don't know that it was canceled by the city, but I do know that a lot of that money, and I think Mr. Albanese knows, it didn't quite get where it was alleged to have gone. Anyway, if you do have further comments or questions, like George from Pelham Parkway, on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, or you want to send something to Sal, you can send it to us. We'll make sure he gets it and read it on the air. You send it to bronxtalk@hotmail.com. You can also make a comment on our Facebook page, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of the show are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Also, please become a fan of Bronx Talk on Facebook. I'm sure Mr. Albanese will do the same. Next Monday night, Memorial Day, we'll have a great show. We will celebrate the holiday with a stirring show honoring Vietnam veterans, who many people believe have been forgotten. Something you won't want to miss. Bronx Talk, of course, Monday nights at 9 o'clock. Thanks to Jane, our producer. Director is Shirley. Studio coordinator is Dina. And to you, see you next week. Good night.